But I think that the capital is structured in such a way, there's enough inertia in the system that it could take 30 years. Gold's been failing for 12 years or something like that, right? Gold's the same price as it was when Bitcoin was invented. There's a lot of capital. When we think about capital structure, it's like $500 trillion to $900 trillion of capital floating around there. It's locked up in structures. Some of it is in currencies and it can move rapidly. Some of it is invested in companies that can't, right, move rapidly. Some of it is tied up in equity. Some of it is tied up in debt. Some of it's tied up in a trust. I have a trust. My trust gave $10 million to a financial advisor or to a company whose strategy is investing in mid-duration corporate debt. And every year I review their performance versus their index. And over the course of a decade, I might start to shift small amounts out. But I think that the capital is structured in such a way, there's enough inertia in the system that it could take 30 years for the capital to get reallocated. Like we're waging a war on the 60-40 portfolio, right?
Is it dead?
How long will it take before people allocate that as 65-35 or 70-30, right? It takes a long time. There are people still invested in gold. You and I joke about that. Gold's been failing for 12 years or something like that, right? Gold's the same price as it was when Bitcoin was invented. And yet, an aggressive move would be a macro investor allocating from 50% gold to 45% gold and 5% Bitcoin, and that's a year's work. How many public speakers, how many well-regarded investors have made negative comments about Bitcoin over the past 12 months because they mistakenly think it's a currency and they think they're sticking up for the dollar, right? Many. Like, I prefer the dollar. So if you understand it's a digital asset, a scarce store of value, speculative digital asset, that's how politically correct people would refer to it, right? And anybody else would say it's just a digital asset or a store of value asset. The first impediment is just understanding that and educating the market that it's a digital asset. I think the second impediment is getting over the issue of is it a threat to the powers that be and will it be banned? So first, what is it? It's an asset. Second, will it be banned? Okay, well, no, we're not going to ban cryptocurrency. We're not going to ban Bitcoin. It's going to be around here. So those two checkboxes are huge. I think the third checkbox is, can I actually buy it via my existing bank? Every publicly traded company has been doing business with probably the same bank for 30 years, Pomp. Some have been doing business with the same bank for 50 years. Some for 100 years, okay? If you trace it. To have adopted a new banking relationship is not a one-in-a-decade thing. But public companies don't change in a decade, right? So if I could buy this directly through Bank of America or JP Morgan or Citigroup, et cetera, I think that makes a big difference. If I have to go to an institutional grade Bitcoin exchange, that's a 1-year exercise in due diligence. Right?
There's friction to doing it.
There's two issues, right? One is before you give $1 billion to a counterparty, you have to inspect their accountants, their legal teams, their licensing, their executive team. Would you give $1 billion to a private company that's new, right? It's like, that's a huge hurdle. And the second is they're not FDIC insured, right? They're not. The imprimatur being backed by the U.S. government means that, in any liquidity crisis, the Federal Reserve gives you $10 billion or $100 billion. How much money did you need, right? And that's what the big licensed banks have. And, the last holdout that wasn't doing that was Goldman Sachs. In the great financial crisis, they broke down and they became a bank, right? And it matters. So if you want to move huge sums of capital, right, at the point that some of the major banks handle the asset, that makes a big difference. because it checks a lot of boxes and people are pretty conservative about that.